Magion is a small satellite which was launched back in the 1977 in Inter-Sputnik program, Inter-Cosmos program. And in that time, it was the beginning of the era of small satellites. And it is maybe one of the very first programs with small satellites where this idea to use the small satellite as something which could be added to the science research with so-called big satellites, when this was practically used. Magion 1 is that small satellite, well, small. In that time it was small. It was about 15 kilograms. Now we should say it's middle, maybe larger. But in that time it was a very small baby, and it was used for the first time to make the magnetospheric measurements on the orbit together with the big one. So at the same time, it was possible to measure this different radiation and different plasma intensity on different two sides on the orbit. And then this idea started to be developed. And during the next, well, 15 years, it was a series of another 4 satellites. So last one was launched in 1996. 1995 was Magion 4, 1996 Magion 5. So I think that this is something which should be sometimes written in the history of so-called small satellite development, that the Czech Republic, Czechoslovakia in that time, was one which has at the moment quite interesting contribution to that movement. The last small satellite, well, at the same time as the Czech satellite, was launched in 2003. Mimosa satellite, which was dedicated to study the astrodynamic influences on the satellite, on the orbit, the measure the differences produced by non-gravitational forces. And before, it was also tested on the shuttle Atlantis, but it was proved that for the measurement of non-gravitational forces on the shuttle is not a good idea because of astronauts. Astronauts make much more noises than the non-gravity forces themselves. Nevertheless, these are the small satellites, and in that time, the Czech researchers went through the whole procedure which was necessary from ITU requirements. So these all satellites are notified and registered properly, I hope, in the registration of ITU. Nevertheless, thanks to the political changes, you know that we went through the very dramatic situation with changes in the political system. And in this case, these political changes has some negative influence on that, because there were different priorities, not small satellites, unfortunately. So these activities and all the Magion series finished. It was ceased. The people disappeared. So now we are in the situation that we try to build up the new capacities with the new generation, with the new young people who are devoted to do something in the space. And thanks to initiative in this Czech Technical University, then in the Aerospace Research Institute, and before it also, it was West Bohemian University. We have some teams where the new experiences and capability is built up. So these 3 are pictures of today's situation with small satellites or CubeSats in Czech Republic. It reminds me of one remark regarding the terminology. We are a small country, so we have small satellites. But at the same time, for us, it is simple satellite. So we don't have too much differences between small and big satellites. The most important thing is what it's doing, if it's functioning well, and if it's usable and profitable for those who operate it. So I believe that also in future, the difference between small and big satellites slightly will diminish, because the most important is the reason why it is used. So we will build, hopefully, more small satellites in the future, and we will also be able to register them properly, to launch them, and to operate them. And for that, we will be very grateful for any experience which we can get. And this specific event, this symposium, is, from that point of view, very important event for us. So thank you for organizing it in Prague. I think it was mentioned several times, but it is really the practical reason for that, because I hope that it will launch the new era for small satellites in Czech Republic, and then we will be able to continue on the experiences and inputs which we get here on this symposium. Besides that, and this could be also some links why to do something in a small satellite, because as I try to explain, for us, small satellite equals to satellites. So we have experiences with some so-called commercial use. Telecommunication, Czech Republic is traditional member of all international organizations which deal with the telecommunication, satellite telecommunication. Satellite navigation, we have already now the couple of companies which are active in developing services based on the localization-based type of technology. Satellite Earth observation, again, these are activities on the side of providers, service providers. So we communicate and we are in contact with the satellite operators to be able to provide the services. And for the future, also these type of activities you can spot and you can find in our country. So, if we, and we would like, I mean, we as a country, to produce and to develop with more activities in space, which is nothing special at the moment, at this time. This is more and more important issue for every country around the globe. So we also try to find the best way and most efficient way how to organize ourselves. Because it's clear that finally, I don't know if finally is the right word, but nevertheless, with experience which is gathered through the more than half of century in the space activities, the level of knowledge and skillness came to such level that space activities is going more and more to be as not any, but as many of other human activities. So it's coming to the people, it's coming on the ground. And we have tried to be prepared. And I think that this event and this symposium, which deals with the small satellites, it's also because of that effect, because it's growing more satellites for different type of activities oriented to Earth, oriented to people, are coming and discussed. So, and these tasks are for us, not for you. Maybe you have solved it already. It means that we need to learn and to possess the necessary knowledge and skills simply to be able to implement the technology. We need it. And at the same time, try to organize ourselves. So it means to set up the legislation, the rules that will help us to do it in an appropriate way. And the last, I think, is that the national infrastructure, which will be supportive to all chain. It means from the researchers to operators, service providers. So this national infrastructure is also very important and influence the result of the use of what is, in parentheses, new space. Maybe that you have heard the expression, the new space. By the way, again, this is another terminology which I don't know. It's good to use the new space because by that we express the fact that it's something different from what was 50 years, 30 years ago. So we try now to say new space, but of course, after another 50 years, this new space again will be old space. So it's relative. Okay, that's all. Thank you again for the opportunity, and I'm glad to be here. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Yes, I like the engineers. They never know how to push a button. I don't understand that. Okay. Thank you, Jan, for that. Yes, please have a seat. Rogers, and you will talk about the current NASA Ames small program. From what you say, Jan, I think that there are two or three things that I retain. Small is beautiful. And this is one thing quite important today, is that I heard also that this symposium is helping also regarding everybody, and particularly Czech Republic. And I like also your endeavor to help connect the unconnected and make the world a better world for everybody. So in that direction, I thank you very much for your presentation and for what Czech Republic is doing. Please, Roger.
Thank you.
Okay.
Hello, I'm Roger Hunter from the NASA Ames Research Center. About a year ago, I started working on the smallest satellite integrated product team at NASA Ames. For the 6 or 7 years prior to that, I was running the Kepler mission for NASA. And these are a few of the smallest satellites that I'd like to talk about first. Some of these have already flown, their missions are complete, some of them are still ongoing, and then there's some that are planned. Of course, everyone talks about, what is the mass regime or the size regime of small satellites. Some of these are a bit bigger than CubeSats, obviously, and I'll talk about a couple of them. LCROSS, of course, was flown back in 2009, and the objective of that mission was to determine, is there a form of water on the surface of the moon, and we proved that there is. And we have some other missions coming up that will investigate the extent of water on the moon. LADI is complete, and that was another small spacecraft. I'll talk about the mission a little bit later. And IRIS is an ongoing mission that is studying the sun. There's a couple of missions coming up, Resource Prospector and TESS, and I'll talk about those as I get into some later charts. I mentioned a little bit about LCROSS already. This was a mission that was capped at around $80 million, and it was, in this case, was mass limited at 1,000 kilograms. That's because it also had a penetrator involved so that we could smash into a crater and cause some ejecta to come up so that we could fly into the ejecta and determine what was in the bottom of one of the craters. IRIS, I mentioned already, stands for Interface Region Imaging Spectrograph. It is observing, if you will, the atmosphere of the sun. It is still being managed by Ames Research Center, and we still have a number of people that are working on this program. And you can see some of the scientific objectives there. For example, which types of non-thermal energy dominate in the chromosphere and beyond, and studying some things related to the magnetic flux and matter when it rises through the solar atmosphere. And we look at and report on coronal mass ejections when they come off the sun as well. LADI was the Lunar Atmosphere and Dust Environment Explorer. After its mission was over, we crashed it onto the other side of the moon. And there were a number of things that were included in the instruments on the spacecraft, including the first time we've demonstrated a laser communications from the moon. One of the things that I'm hoping to do on some future missions is demonstrate laser communications from Mars. This is just a nice photograph of the Laddie launch coming out of Wallops Island